old media is defense-oriented, new media is offense. Talk more about why that is.
There's still this anxiety that people have, which is legacy media somehow is like where the respectability is, the prestige is. I don't believe that anymore, and I think it's very important for people to kind of get that out of their system.
So first, I just want to say it's Gabby's birthday today. I'm so excited the next 1 in 5 for many reasons, but one is that Ben had floor seats to the game 6 and wasn't going to make it today, and so we're so lucky that we get to have Ben here. And Mark, not a huge basketball guy, but he did tweet about how Jalen Brunson, he had a comment that he operates purely on instinct, not on introspection. And Mark appreciates that.
Retard maxing.
Obviously working.
Exactly. Many people are saying, across industries. And so I actually think that's a pretty interesting segue, because one of the rules of new media, Mark, that we were talking about with the CEO last week in our growth portfolio is authenticity, and sort of being able to have the same conversations on camera that you would have in person behind closed doors. Why don't you talk about that a bit more, and why that's so important to really nail in terms of nailing your voice and how to build that presence? Because a lot of mistakes that founders will make is trying to be too buttoned up, trying to be too media trained, et cetera. As we uncover the new rules of new media, why don't you start there?
Yeah, so I had this really formative experience when I was younger. So in the 90s, when Ben and I were coming up. And so, in those days, it's pre-blogs, pre-YouTube, all this stuff. And so in those days, the assumption was 100% of what you did, if you were running a company or doing anything, was you're going to have to work through, established media, legacy media. And then everybody would get, of course, media trained in how to do it. And,
the most painful experience in the world.
Oh yeah. So for people who haven't been through media training, it's actually
watch yourself on TV. It's
yeah. So okay. So here's how media training works. I don't know if they still do it, but do they still do it? You guys still do it? Okay. Yeah. You probably still do it. Okay. So for people who haven't been through it, yeah. So it's like you get put in front of one of these camera in your face, and then somebody who's supposed to, who you think is your friend, they do like the full 60 minutes interview with you, and whatever, and then they do it for like an hour, and then they literally make you sit there and watch it, which is just like the meanest thing you can do to somebody.
And critique you. And you're looking at yourself fuck it up, and they're going, you see how you fucked that up? And you're like, wow, I'm really uncomfortable now. I'm never going on TV.
Exactly. And you're like, can we just no, you can't fast forward. We're going to watch the entire thing. And then maybe we'll watch it again. Yeah. And so it is very revealing. And you discover all kinds of things about your personal affect, by the way. Also, you discover all the things you do, all the extra words.
How much you hate your voice.
Yes, exactly. How much you hate how you look. I mean, it's incredible. Yeah. It's incredible. And so if your ego just survives the beating, you go into a successful career. And so, that's what you did. And then, but it was always so weird, because it's like the result is just like, it just always struck me. It's just like the result is like, wow, you see like important people with important things to say on TV or whatever, they just seem like plastic people. They just seem like, it's all very, fake and staged. And then, by the way, this is like, in the old days, it's like, because all the anchor people or interviewers are all like, using, anchorman voice. And then you get a CEO up there who just says like the most innocuous things possible. And a lot of CEOs in those days, and by the way, still they rank their success in doing an interview or giving a speech based on minimum controversy, right? So they come off stage. I've worked with lots of CEOs, like they come off stage, and they're very proud of themselves because they didn't make any news. Right. So sort of like that. And so,
yeah, that is the key.
Right. So I go through the media. So
all news is bad news.
So I get, we hire at the time, my company, we hired, at the time was considered the best media trainer, who was a guy who had previously been a producer at 60 Minutes,
Lee Zeldin.
Lee Zeldin, who'd been a producer. He was actually quite a well-known guy at the time. He had been Lowell Bergman's producer, and Lowell Bergman became, Lowell Bergman? No. Well, I mean, Mike Wallace, it was that whole complex. But he's like, we're not doing any of the classic media training that we do. He said, we're going to do the thing that everybody always underrates, which is we're going to get you to basically just say all the things in public that you would say if you were sitting having lunch with a friend. Right. And I remember like the back of my head, like, just like blew open, because it's just like, okay. And then, and then immediately you're like, okay, why are we paying this guy that? Then it's like, because that's like very obvious advice. And then it's like, nobody else will give you that advice. And what's going on. He just said, look, he said the following. He said, if you are on stage or in an interview and you were talking about something and you don't know that topic inside out already, like, what the hell are you doing there? So the only thing that you should ever be talking about is something that you know intimately. If you know it intimately, you should be able to talk about it in a viscerally interesting way, that really relays your thoughts on the thing. And you ought to be able to come across as a very interesting person, because it's just like if you're sitting across the table talking to a friend. And so he's like, my training is at 100% to try to get you to not do all the other stuff and basically be able to do that. And then, the other part, because you assume the media is adversarial. The other part was then, the forget what he called the pivot or whatever, which was basically just the thing of like, you never answer their questions. You always answer your own questions, which is,
which by the way, makes it a little unnatural, right?
It does. It's the Jedi, but it's the Jedi Knight thing that made that whole approach work, which is, it's just like, okay, you're talking naturally. Well, one of the ways you talk naturally is you just refuse to answer the bad questions, and then you just substitute in your good question. Anyway, so he went through the whole thing. And so then we've been watching the evolution of the whole new media landscape for 30 years. And it's just like, wow, if you watch what Palmer Luckey does, or if you watch what, Alex Karp does, or if you watch what Elon does, or you watch what any of the great communicators do, like that's what they're doing. I'd say put Jensen in that rank, lately. It's just like, wow. It's like, and by the way, this is the rise of the long form podcast, the 3-hour conversation. And then just, by the way, the sort of re-rise of the idea of just like interesting people having interesting conversations, which, was very radical at one point, which is now a common thing. And so I think that remains the actual advice. And of course, Eric, to your point, what that gets across is authenticity, which is like, okay, am I, in addition to what's being said, do I actually, as the viewer audience, do I actually feel like I'm meeting the real person?
Yeah. Very good
And
points.
related, we've been talking about how old media is defense-oriented, new media is offense. Talk more about why that is and what that playbook looks like. One of the things we were talking about, Mark, also in that meeting, is the importance of outside in and situating sort of your story within the context of what's happening externally.
Yeah, so the press, in my view, and reporters get furious at me when I say this, which is why I know that I'm correct. The traditional press, legacy press, defined itself as having two functions, right? Which one was impartial journalism, objective journalism, sometimes called the voice from nowhere, which meant presenting both sides of something. By the way, under the assumption that everything has two sides. And by the way, not more than two sides. And so that there's always something a little bit weird about that. But, at least the idea of like showing an issue, explaining it, articulating it, letting different spokespeople, for the different points of view actually say it. And then they had the second mission was to speak truth to power.
Yeah,
right?
that was the one that got in the way of the first.
That's the one that got in the way of the first one. So speak truth to power. And that became the way they ended up describing that was afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted.
Yeah.
Right. And of course, at this point, we know what that means.
Yeah. Well, it devolved into power to truth. So it's like the press's way of intimidating you into not saying what you thought.
Right, because it's a line between actually objective and then activist, right? Somebody with an agenda. And so I think my view is what happened over time is that second one just like swamped the first one, and then it just became the thing. And then as a consequence, like just the very nature of the interaction changed. And the short version is I did tons of traditional media between 1994 and 2017, and every once in a while